What's up, geeks and gamers? It's Odin coming back with a box office breakdown for this past weekend, which saw the new release of Scream 6. That's right, there are 6 of these now out in existence, but hey, there is clearly a demand for them amongst the very passionate fan base, as this film ended up making $44.5 million in its domestic opening. Also, we are going to talk about Creed 3's numbers, and also Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and where this all ends up in the comparison between this and the other films and the franchise. And let's just say Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, we could pretty much say at this point, is going to be the lowest grossing film of the Ant-Man franchise. And when you spent an extra $60 to $70 million, Disney, compared to the first 2 Ant-Man films, yeah, that's definitely not a good look for not only the Ant-Man franchise, but also the MCU in general going forward. And so, as I've said previously, Scream 6 won the weekend with $44.5 million, $12,000 per screen. Creed 3 came in at a very strong second place, dropping 53%, so a pretty strong hold there, $27.1 million there, cracking $100 million domestically, so very impressive numbers there. I will have a fuller box office breakdown of Creed compared to the other 2 films, though, in my in the review that I do over on my channel, OMB Reviews, because I do want to, of course, have this compared to the other films in the franchise adjusted for inflation, because that's the only real fair way to do it. And if you're triggered by that, I got news for you, in the words of Friday Night Sights. 65 also came out this weekend. I was not a big fan of it. I thought it was quite boring, but ended up doing better than what they had projected. $12.3 million. Originally, it was projected to do single digits, so much better than what they thought, but the film still cost probably a bit more than what they should have spent on it. And so, therefore, it is still not looking all that great to make its money back. We'll talk about that when we look at the actual charting for the film. Coming in number 4 spot is Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, dropping another 45%, 4 weeks out, dropping over 700 screens. Disney is basically willing this film to remain in theaters. It is basically consistently, even 4 weeks out now, most of its days during the week, at least last week, were under $1 million, which the other films did not get to until about a week or 2 after. So what we're seeing is that this film is already falling well behind the pacing of those 2 films. And again, we'll have a fuller breakdown of that and comparison of that in another video. Cocaine Bear came in at the number 5 film of the week, dropping another 44%. This film, I think, probably has made the vast bulk of the money, but hey, it has indeed made its money back. So kudos to Elizabeth Banks for getting a writer that is not her, because I ultimately think that is probably the reason why the film has done as well as it has at this point in time. I'll do a full box office breakdown of the top 10 plus in the video on my channel, but let's go ahead and dive into what is it that the news media is saying. What is it the shill media is saying right here? Scream 6 even louder with $44 million franchise opening record. Now, Tony, don't you play that again. It's interesting how we've had a bunch of franchise best, right? Ant-Man was the franchise best. Creed was the franchise best. Scream 6 franchise best. Again, until you adjust for inflation, in which case I believe it was Scream 2, Scream 3 that ended up actually having a bigger opening weekend. But I digress. It also talks about Creed 3 punching to $100 million, which is indeed impressive. But again, I do think that it's important for us to actually look and compare these films in actual like-for-like markets with actual fair numbers representing them. Scream 6, though, is doing very well despite all of that. So again, I'm not saying that Scream 6 is not doing well. Some people, I think, assume that when I talk about inflation or when I make comparisons, that means that I don't think the film is doing well. It's just that, no, I think it is ultimately a fact that these films and the dollars that we spend in today's market are not nearly as worth as much as they would have been back in previous years. And that's the only way that we can really have a fair comparison between them, especially if we are, again, and this is me specifically calling out people like Tony, when they're using franchise best record setting, it's like, again, we need to probably relook at some of those records and actually, treat them fairly as such. Anyway, this film has made $44.5 million domestically. This will be a much bigger domestic than international release. So a very strong start off. This film is well on its way to breaking even by next weekend. Creed 3 is already $179 million, so this film will easily cross $200 million. And right now I'm projecting the film to potentially get upwards of $300 million, which would be very, very impressive, especially when you compare this film to the other films in the franchise. Obviously, I know a lot of people are liking this movie. I am not one of those persons. I thought the film that was quite boring, and I thought that it lacking The presence of Rocky Balboa was very big. But as you can see, when you compare these films, even with that of the second movie, this film is projected to, at least at this point, do better, even when you adjust for inflation, using the numbers here from the numbers. But one thing I have mentioned in previous videos is that the numbers definitely uses older inflation numbers. It does not use January of 2023 in its comparisons. And so that's what I'll be doing and breaking down, and trying to also break down ticket prices the best of my ability too, to try to give a better idea about exactly where these films are, ticket for ticket sale. Is the film outselling the previous films or not? Again, because that's something that just fascinates me personally. Coming also as another film that very vastly bored me was the film 65 with, again, this was actually on my anticipated movies of the year. This was one of the films I was actually kind of looking forward to, because I thought, could be a very fun sci-fi adventure with dinosaurs. And it just ends up being a film where if you've seen the trailer, you pretty much know everything that's going on, and there really aren't any fun twists or turns, and ultimately the CGI for the vast majority of the film just does not look very good. You add in on top of that a lot of just very boring dialogue, a lot of very boring storytelling, and it's a film that will at least put me to sleep, and probably put others to sleep as well. But there are definitely people that are big fans of it, and I know that I've been hearing that in the comments section, that some people are enjoying this movie. So hey, if you're enjoying it, great. But I think that ultimately, even though clearly the word of mouth is helping this film a bit for those people that do like the film and are supporting the film, I don't know if it's going to be enough, though, to make up for the amount of money that they spent on the film itself. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania is definitely not going to make its money back. I mean, especially when you look at this domestic versus international. I mean, we're used to these types of movies making more internationally, but when it's this type of separation and the numbers aren't really all that large to begin with, yeah, this film is not in a good position, especially when you compare it to some of the other films. Even historically, it's pointing out here on the numbers, the film is just not doing well. With a $200 million budget, this film may not even break even based on my metrics, and my metrics are much more conservative than what some other people use. Some other people are saying that this the break-even point for this film is $600 million, and again, they might be right, but the numbers that I've been using for years say the break-even point's $500 million, and the fact that it won't even break that more conservative estimate of a break-even point, again, spells massive danger for the MCU going forward. Going to my charting, because we all like to do some charting here. Again, that $67 million for Scream 6 is very, very impressive. Let me go ahead and put the formulas off as I was copying these over to the form that connects to my website. A little behind the scenes there. So Scream also is, once again, another low budget iteration. They spend very little money on these films because they know that there is still a large enough fan base that's going to come out to support the film and help them make some profit to boot. If you actually compare this film to the height of the franchise, which was around Scream 2, Scream 3, when you look at just raw numbers themselves, you recognize that they've lost a lot of people, but they still have, again, a strong core fan base that are going out to see this film. Already, $67 million means it's only $12 million in the red, meaning that this film, a break-even point of 87.5, is very likely going to be met probably by next weekend. The movie 65, as I've mentioned previously, I think will probably end up being a flop. It needs to make $112.5 million worldwide to break even, and right now it's at 20.8. I just don't see that happening, but hey, stranger things have indeed happened. Also, a new film, Champions, came out. You notice I didn't talk about it because it didn't really crack into those top spots. Made $5.9 million, no budget to speak of, and so I cannot speak to whether or not it's going to be a success or not. But based on that number specifically, I would say maybe not. All looking at the Operation Fortune numbers, we don't have any indication of what this film likely will make because it did get an early release internationally. What I can say, though, is that it's not doing a whole lot in domestically, and so this film is looking like it'll probably end up being a box office flop, which makes me sad because it's a film that I definitely want to go see. Creed 3 is only $4 million in the red, so this film absolutely will hit its break-even point. And as I talked about last weekend, the film will likely break somewhere between. Actually, no, these are new numbers, sorry. So because of the $179 million in week 2, I'm projecting the film to make somewhere between $256 and $358 million, which would be the highest in the franchise. And again, that's before I look into those numbers further, just to try to give the fairest assessment of it all. This film is the most expensive of those films, especially even when you adjust for inflation, and therefore this film is still set, though, to make its money back. So clearly, enough people are enjoying this film, and hey, kudos to them for being able to make a movie that likely will make some money. Cocaine Bear is indeed on the cusp of breaking even, and I think that it absolutely will get to that point. Jesus Revolution has made its money back just barely, but it indeed has made it nonetheless, and will still make a little bit of extra profit to begin with. And then Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania is still $31 million in the red, and so my projections had this film making $11 to $136 million in net gain profit. There's actually a very good chance. Again, the low end number I had for it, based off of the 363, right? Of based on historical standards, the film was projected to make at least $519 million. And that's assuming 70% of its box office in the first 2 weeks. We're looking at numbers right here that could indicate that this film made over over 3/4 of its entire box office in the first 2 weeks alone. That is abysmal for any movie, let alone for an MCU film, and not only spells danger for them, but also for the MCU going forward. But those are the numbers as they stand. What are y'all's thoughts? Have you seen any of the new releases? Are you one of the persons that's going out to see Scream 6? Again, the film is doing very well. I do, again, have issues when it comes to the box office media, though, continuing to try to push out these false narratives, trying to say, oh, this is the highest ever. And again, it all comes down to just not really just being honest with it. Is it doing well? Yes, absolutely. Is it going to make its money back? Yes, absolutely. And ultimately, that's what most studios, ultimately care about. But when we start talking about records and we start talking about things like that, it definitely bothers me that they continue to push numbers that really aren't telling the full story, because even though the number seems nice, the fact is much less people are going to see movies today than back in 2018, 2015. And I think ultimately that should be the barometer really of the success of a franchise is, are they able to increase their audience, or are they seeing a decrease in audience? And again, I'll break that down at some point on my channel. But what are your thoughts about this? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button. Also, of course, check us out over on any of the alternate media platforms as well, on Rumble and Odyssey, wherever it is that we are. And again, of course, make sure you check out geeksandgamers.com to become a member and also support our locals page as well. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, a blessed Lent, and as always, God bless.